as I understand it, you had no musical upbringing. No, your parents didn't play instruments. You were never trained musically, and you fell into it later in life. How did that come to fruition?
You know what? I'm a very curious person by nature, so you know, basically one day what happened was I was very intrigued by what I was hearing. I couldn't quite comprehend how these guys were able to do what they were doing, you know, these complex soundscapes. So to me, it personally happened where I kind of sat down and like I started fiddling around with, you know, an early version of Fruity Loops. And obviously I was not very good at anything, but it's one of those things, if you stick with it and you be patient and kind of understand that it's not really going to happen overnight, you know, it may happen. So, you know, I practiced the craft for a while and I wasn't really good at it. You know, it's kind of like learning any new skill. You're not going to be good at it at first, but the more you practice, the better you get at it. And my personal belief is, if you have any sort of creative skill in you, whether it's drawing, painting, or sculpting, whatever it might be, I think that allows you to get into it a little bit quicker than someone who doesn't, because, you know, as I said, my personal belief is that creative people tend to think differently, just slightly differently. You know, you look at an object, you might be able to analyze it from a different perspective than someone who, you know, who's not creative. And, you know, I believe that creativity is something you're born with. It's, you either have it or you don't.
I've been actually curious about your upbringing. And being that you were born in Bosnia, you came from Sarajevo and you moved to Toronto, what was the transition like being a kid moving from a place like Sarajevo at the time to Toronto?
You know what? I mean, I think a large part of it, you know, thankfully to my mom, I've kind of forgotten, because it is very like stressful to uproot everything and to move out of a country that's in a state of war to a country where you have nothing and no one. Well, thankfully I had, you know, my uncle lived or still lives in Toronto, so that's really the only reason why we even moved here. So we literally came with just our bags, with, you know, small personal belongings. Everything else was left behind. So, you know, to go from doing relatively okay to basically being a refugee, you know, it's a pretty, you know, stiff transition. And luckily my mom, she understood that, and she tried to do everything in her power to kind of make us forget the fact that we're here and we have nothing. I still remember my childhood days in Toronto. All we really had was a bed, TV, and a Nintendo. But that Nintendo kind of saved the day. If it wasn't for that, maybe I wouldn't even be here. Who knows? So video games kind of took my mind off of things over there, and my mom knew that this was going to happen. That, you know, if we keep the kids busy, they won't have time to think about it. Eventually, they might even like forget some of the details. So, you know, I guess video games have kind of been instrumental in my upbringing.
They've kind of been your balance.
Yeah, it definitely was a balance, you know, between, you know, the present day and kind of what we left behind. And as much as people want to give video games kind of a negative label, in my case, you know, it was something that was positive.